Morning, everybody. Happy Tuesday, and welcome to the Leasing Highway podcast, a podcast centered on the heartbeat of the apartment industry. And just our goal is to share the voices of our industry with you. We're presented by the Apartment Association, and I'm one of your co-hosts, Karen Gladney.
And I'm Ian Andrews, and today we are joined by Jared Miller, who's COO of RedPeak, and we're super excited to have you, Jared, and hear a little about your perspective on the industry, and I'll toss it to you to just give a quick intro about yourself.
Sure. Thanks, Ian. Thanks, Karen. Thanks for having me today. I'm super fortunate to be in this business. I started off in multifamily in college, thinking that elusive free rent was a real thing. And here we are more years later than I'm actually going to say. But I've been super fortunate to work with some great people, great companies in this fantastic industry for so long. And, I'm at RedPeak now. I've been here for 3 years. I'm what we call a RedPeak repeater. I worked at RedPeak early in my career. And like many people, I came back. I tried to replicate this culture for years. And while I worked with wonderful people, it wasn't nearly the same. So when I had the opportunity to come back to RedPeak as the COO, I immediately jumped on that.
Yeah, that's a special quality to have for a company, right? That culture, and to be able to repeat it anywhere is hard. And you hear about the boomerang team members, but there's a lot of emotion that goes into that too. I'm sure for you, Jared, over the years through your professional journey, as you've switched companies, started your own. Talk a little bit about those emotions you experienced as you left or transitioned.
Sure. It's never easy to leave an organization. I think you always leave a part of yourself there. And that was definitely the case when I left here. I joined RedPeak, I guess it was almost 9 years into my career, the first time. And, I'll talk about leaving here because it was something really special. It was not something I intended to do. I needed to move back to the East Coast, and it was one of the hardest things I've ever done. To leave the company that I felt so attached to and the people I felt so attached to. But I was, lucky to find an opportunity on the East Coast, and I started off there as a director of marketing. And by the time I left, I was the senior vice president of the company, overseeing training and marketing and business development, pieces of operations, different things, and asset management, which was new for the firm. And it was time to go. It was time for me to grow. And the story there was I left to start my own company. I left with one of my coworkers. We had orchestrated it perfectly, so we thought. He was telling his boss, as I was sitting down with the CEO and telling him I was leaving. We were in 2 different states at the time. And we left to kind of go do our own thing. We joined an existing platform to bring the development side. So we spent a couple of years doing that, and that's a whole story. That could be a podcast on its own.
I bet.
So we left to join a small company and bring the development piece of that in-house. And long story short, and it is very long, 2 years into that company, we ended up shutting down the management company. There were some challenges that we walked into that you couldn't turn around. But what was interesting was in that 2-year period, we built a phenomenal team that are still fairly connected today, a great culture. We were performing well. There were just some unforeseen circumstances. So that was probably the hardest time for me as far as leaving a company because, I was the president of multifamily operations, and I had to go in and tell our team that, okay, over the next 60 days, we're going to be unwinding operations.
Oh.
And watching their faces and having a relationship with each of them, it was really hard. I stayed behind to make sure that things were unwound properly and that they were all taken care of and they all had a new adventure to go on. That was heartbreaking for sure.
Yeah.
At that point, we took that development pipeline and started Homestead, which was the company I was with for a number of years. And it was just 3 of us building and buying properties. And it was a great adventure. But again, RedPeak came calling at the right time. And it's funny, I was gone from RedPeak for 11 years. During those 11 years, I would come back to Denver just to see people, hang out with people. I would come here for work, to meet with, a management company we were working with, or, a supplier, whomever. And I'd find myself back in the RedPeak office after that meeting, just to have lunch with people. And I'd end up sitting around the office and working the rest of the day. So if that wasn't a sign, what was?
Right.
I love just all the perspective that you have on this industry, and the successes and the other side of just understanding to going through those tough times really gives you just such good perspective, and really helps us grow so much. And one thing I've been excited to ask you is really through all your different viewpoints on the industry. You've seen so many different systems, and one thing that we're always kind of talking about and battling here is that change management, and really wanting to get from what are those tips and tricks of whether it's implementing new systems or change at an even higher level, and what are those tips and tricks to get through that?
Let's just be honest first. This industry is not good at change management. We're not. There are very few companies out there that have a formalized process or that have mastered it. And the timing of this question is really interesting, because I consider myself a change agent, but I'm also, my workflow in my brain does not necessarily follow that structured process. And I take a little different approach with each thing. And what that's leading to is how you balance yourself out in your organization. If you know you're good at change, but you're not necessarily good at dotting all the I's and crossing the T's during the process, you have to have that person that balances you out. And we've really focused on that here at RedPeak over the last year and a half. We brought back another RedPeak repeater, our director of marketing, Faith Aids, and promoted her director of marketing and innovation. She's now running our change management process. We rolled it out to our executive leadership team this week, a very formal process that is in writing, that has steps along the way to make sure that we don't get to that 80% mark and think we're done. And that's the big risk there. But, one, being an agent of change is important, but two, realizing that we've got the pandemic and it's not really behind us. We learned how fast we could pivot, and that, process mattered, but it became less important. It became about getting it done. We proved to ourselves that the industry can do that. But now kind of taking that back and saying, okay, we accomplished it. We ran through this last 18 months at breakneck speed and proved that we can make change and we can move forward. I think the pandemic is going to dramatically change our process and change our industry as a whole. We've been very slow to adopt technology. We've now kind of changed that. We know how critical it is. I mean, look at just the self-guided tour aspect of our business. It was nearly non-existent before March of 2020. Now most companies are doing it to some extent. That's major change. But it's working through that discomfort and not saying throwing your hands up in the air once you get to that 60% mark. It's really about the follow through.
Yeah, I think the follow through is key. And to your point, I think sometimes you get to the 60% mark or the 80% mark, and because as humans we're averse to change. Not even just our industry, even people who say they love it. It's hard to build new habits or go through something, and you might feel like at the 60% mark, tossing your hands up and not following through. But if you can just follow through, I think that goes a long way. And you're so right. We're going to continue to need to embrace it. So those tips are helpful. We'll step aside and flip back around and pick up on that, Jared, on the other side, and take a quick break.
Okay.
Introducing Remote Lock Universal Access Control. Remote Lock lets you manage any lock from smart locks to hardwired access control systems, securing every door from the main entrance to the rooftop patio. And you get to choose from the best top-of-the-line smart locks out there, from brands like Yale, Schlage, Kwikset, August, Mercury, and many more. Now you can configure and add access at the push of a button and set up customized schedules for each and every user, all within a matter of minutes. It even works with property management and booking software like Airbnb, Guesty, Entrata, RealPage, and more. With Remote Lock, you'll finally have a future-proof solution that controls all your properties around the world from a single, easy-to-use platform. Let Remote Lock be the last access control partner you'll ever need.
Welcome to your beautiful new apartment home here at Gables Point 14. As you can see, we're featuring this beautiful one-bedroom den.
Welcome back. Speaking of change and technology, right? Jared, when you think about this industry, and you said how lucky you are to be in it, I think we all feel that way. And we all have different reasons why we love it. What do you love most about the industry?
You know, there's so much I love most about this business, but, I would say the bottom line is the people. I think back to early in my career, some of the people I met at different conferences and how close I am to those people still to this day, how they've become, some of our closest friends and some of our family by choice. It's about the people. And it's also about the opportunities this business presents. And one of my passions is, figuring out how we get out there as an industry and sell all we have to offer to new talent. We've got to become more diverse in thought and in background. I just think all of that's important, but it's one of those businesses I think people don't think about. When you're in college, very few of us said specifically, I want to go into multifamily. I want to be in the apartment industry. Most of us, it kind of happened by accident, and thankfully it did. But how do we better expand our visibility and our presence?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's so many opportunities I think in this industry, and from your perspective, I'm sure that you've seen a ton. Are there any other big opportunities that you see as crucial for this industry?
There are a few. There are a few. A lot of them are technology based. We've got to embrace technology and embrace change. If not, there are some new players in the space that are going to leave us in their dust if we're not really careful. But embracing all that's out there and really finding those best of breed, supplier partners, technology partners to help push us forward. I think that's a huge opportunity. The other is, we actually have access to a really young talent pool if we think about it. I spent a number of years in student housing. And what I always found interesting was how different management companies treated that talent, right? Because they're coming in, those community assistants come in and they work 10 to 20 hours a week. But they're super smart and they're really driven. And unfortunately, so much of our interaction with them is based on whether their school schedule fits our need. Instead of honing that talent and investing in them, if you look at student housing, you have a 800-bed property, you might have 8 different community assistants. That's a great talent pool that we should be tapping into. And it was always hard for me to watch some companies that didn't appreciate that talent, didn't appreciate those ideas. The ideas that those young people are bringing to the table are absolutely phenomenal. Give them the runway. They're going to change this industry if we let them.
Oh yeah, and it makes it so fun, when you engage new talent and new perspectives too, just to help us all not be complacent.
That's right. I don't think any of us have been able to sit back over the last 16 or 18 months and be complacent.
No.
And those that have, I'm sure you see it in your numbers and your retention with your team members, not just your residents, but we have to move forward.
Yeah, the talent pool is exciting to think about. It's just exciting to think about educating people about what a phenomenal industry this is, to your point, what you said, because nobody realizes all the different career paths that are within it. You think of, an old sitcom in the 70s with a guy tossing a set of keys to somebody. Don't think of this professional industry that we have. Well, to flip it a little bit, Jared, because, on here, we ask a lot of these professional questions, but we also want to hear, the heart behind the headshot, so to speak. So who's the Jared at work versus the Jared at home?
That's a good question. It is different. And it's funny, my partner is also in multifamily. So, by the end of the day, sometimes we're kind of exhausted. And while we make decisions all day long, the hardest thing we can decide is what's for dinner. Right? That's where the arguments could come in because neither of us wants to make a decision. But at home, I really do try to disconnect. One of the great things that we've created here is a really good work-life balance. And it's actually one of the reasons I came to RedPeak the first time. I was a director of marketing. I had 40,000 apartments. And I would go home at night and just be completely exhausted. Or I'd spend most weeks traveling, and I had a young son at the time, and I was missing out on a lot. So I came here for the work-life balance. I've tried to maintain that. I try to, push that with our team and make sure they're taking PTO. But, for me, after hours, it becomes about friends and family. And yeah, there are things that come up, but I'm trying, it's a work in progress, to be really cognizant of those after hours emails and when I'm thinking about and responding to things. But for me, after hours, I love to travel. Here, I love to spend time in the mountains and just disconnect. We've built some really great friendships in Denver, investing in those, trying to spend time with people. And, we've been here 3 years. And what's interesting is there are some people we haven't seen since we moved back. So we're trying to reconnect with those people and invest on that side. It's just so important. But I try to travel a lot, even during the pandemic. My son lives on the East Coast. He is turning 17 in a couple months. And that's a second that I will not give up. So even during the pandemic, we've been back and forth to Florida as safely as possible. But that time is so important. When I'm there, everything kind of revolves around him and that schedule, and spending time with our family there as well.
That's so special. I have to ask you, because you are one of the most well-traveled people I know, right in line with Ian, I feel like. What are a couple of your favorite places, which is a very hard question, I know, to answer for somebody who's super well-traveled, because they all have their own magic. But just curious that you mentioned travel. What are some of your favorites?
Sometimes I think it's about the eye-opening experience. Mm-hmm. We're so fortunate in this country to have all that we do. I would say one of the more memorable and a bit more random was a trip we took, and we ended up in Vietnam, and we were in Da Nang, and we had a guide, and he was so proud of his city and how clean it is, and just going on and on. And what that gave me was perspective, right? Because by American standards, it wasn't clean. It was a very different experience. But those eye-opening experiences that can help you relate to people and understand, I think, are important. We've gone to the Baltics a couple times, and we've been to Russia twice, and in two different kind of economic climates and political climates, and seeing the impact of that. So our vacations tend not to be super relaxing. It's not uncommon to check our iPhones and realize we've walked 15 miles in a day. But, we try to plow through a lot, but, I love Spain. It's one of my favorite countries. Anytime I can go to Barcelona, I'm in. But I'm also fortunate in that because my son still lives on the East Coast, we do go back to Florida, and we spend usually a week a month there. And I'm working, my normal 40 to 50 plus hours a week. But, taking advantage of that, and kind of, since we don't really live there, it kind of helps maximize the time that we are there, right? And enjoy what we can. But yeah, I'll travel as much as I can.
That's so cool.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Sounds like you've been to some amazing places. And yeah, like Karen said, I definitely share that passion and think you just get so much culture and perspective from going around the world. I think I learned more in my 1 year abroad than I did the other 3 years of college combined.
I'm sure.
But, shifting gears here a little bit, I wanted to ask you, across the industry, you're known as such an influencer and thought leader, and really just curious on what you attribute that to.
It's such an odd thing for me, honestly, and an odd thing to hear. I know we talked a little bit about, the companies I've been with and making that difficult change, but, I started off as a 19-year-old college student in this business, working part-time at a property in Columbus, Ohio. I, at that point, had already had my real estate license because I decided that was part of what I was going to do. Nobody buys a house from a 19-year-old, just so you know. They will lease an apartment. So, going back to that, and I kind of found my passion. It was almost by accident. But I think part of it is I've been really fortunate to get to know a lot of diverse people in this business, diverse backgrounds, some people that own, a supplier organization or that started, a development company. I think that's a lot of it, but part of it is for me, I'm not scared of change. That's a big piece. I've moved my family across the country a couple times now. That's part of it, but just being open and listening to people. And I think part of that is back to that talent pool, trying to find those people and making that a focus of mine, I think has done that. But I've also been fortunate. I go back to one of the first conferences I attended, and it was brainstorming in, I think it was 1999. And I met a bunch of people that are still friends to this day. Well, I went to that conference for 12 or 13 years in a row. And I think it was year 2. It was when it had moved to Atlanta and was on the West Coast. I think it was still in Reno. But Lisa Trozine comes up to me and says, "Hey, I know you. I've heard you. You've been in my groups before. You need to facilitate and you need to start speaking." For me, somebody investing just those few words was a flashpoint. And then I kind of got the bug. I love speaking in front of people. It's very strange. It's not something I would have ever seen as a comfort level, but I thoroughly enjoy it. I love connecting with people. And I think that's a big part of it. And I've just never shied away from it. But I also think, here at RedPeak, we have an interesting process. Every quarter, we do Amplify surveys. So it's team member sentiment. And then tagged on with that, our team members get to ask anonymous questions. And let me just say, over the last 16 months, those questions have not been comfortable, right? Mm-hmm. Going through a pandemic and really figuring out how to navigate this, but putting myself in some uncomfortable situations, I think has helped, all of that. So don't run from the discomfort.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's so true. And what you said about being a good listener, Jared, and just to the words that Lisa said to you, how much that fueled you. And you definitely are a voice that people listen to. And I think everybody appreciates that you don't run from the uncomfortable, because that's hard. That's hard to do. So we appreciate you. It's
how we fix problems too, and fix opportunities. If we don't know that somebody's feeling a certain way, you can't fix it. No. So I'm a fixer. I love everybody to feel good.
You're a change agent and a fixer.
It's also a fault, let's be honest. I want everybody to feel good. Working through some of those challenges and having honest conversations, and sometimes raw conversations, the outcome can be phenomenal, but you can't shy away from it.
Yeah, exactly. Let's take another quick break, and then we'll be right back.
All right.
Meet Drew. She's a photographer living in Chicago and is currently looking for a new apartment. She's found a few places she likes, but isn't sure which one is the best fit. That's when Drew discovered RentGrata. RentGrata allowed Drew to talk to Ashley, a resident of the building she was considering. After talking to Ashley, Drew knew it was the right place for her, so she decided to move in. Today, Drew found a new home and Ashley made some referral money. But with RentGrata, it doesn't stop there. When this conversation data is combined with AI machine learning intelligence, RentGrata can provide new insights that allow property managers to get a better sense of what renters want. And that means a better renter experience for all. Welcome your residents, reach them with RentGrata.
All right, welcome back. It's funny, Jared. I know that we've said this before on one, but 30 minutes really does feel like a very short period of time. And every one of these questions that we've talked about, I felt like could have been or could be an entire podcast. And I find myself up against it going, wait, there's 1,000 more questions for you. And one of them is, what are you most proud of that you've implemented?
That's a big question. I wish I had
the whole podcast question.
I kind of ponder. I think probably it comes back to the people that have been hired. For me, that is an implementation. Mm-hmm. Pulling the right people in at the right time in the right scenario. We're a really small company. We have 130 team members. We have 45, soon to be 46, 47 communities, but they range in size from 12 apartments to almost 600. So you kind of run the gambit. So at the end of the day, we're a 3,300 unit apartment company. So you really think about that and you wonder, what level of talent can a company that size have? I will tell you, the people we've brought in, the people that were here, the people we've added over the last 3 years, our talent per unit, which is how I think about it, will absolutely blow everybody out of the water. We have the absolute best people in this company. That's an implementation I'm proud of. A lot of them were here, but we brought on a number of new team members over the last 3 years. But thinking about some other things, I would say one of the things that I learned from my student housing experience more than ever before, and it's because I had the opportunity, was how critical it is to align site selection, development, design, interior design, marketing, branding, service delivery, all under one umbrella. If you have the opportunity to do that and do it right from the beginning, the value is unbelievable. The challenge so many of us have is we do that as an afterthought, right? Even if it's an acquisition, it's really hard to get all of that aligned at once. But that's one of the things I'm more proud of is we're working on some new developments here at RedPeak, is that the people that are at the table are those that need to be at the table from the very beginning. Mm-hmm. And it's a very holistic approach to everything. So we're not going to have this, large property that kind of feels one way on the outside and you walk in and it's the polar opposite. And then the service delivery has nothing to do with the exterior or interior design. That's such a great opportunity. But, I've been fortunate to touch a lot in my career. I was the marketing guy that somehow became the operator, and there was asset management along the way too. So, I've had the opportunity to do a lot. And my hope is that I can afford, that same opportunity for other people.
Yeah.
I know we're running low on time here and want to get to our last walk-off home run question, as I call it, which is...
I can't believe it's time.
I know, right? What advice would you give someone just starting out in the industry?
Take chances. I would say that is paramount. I look back and I still scratch my head a little bit, thinking about where I started and how fortunate I've been and where I am today. But a lot of that is not just doing what was in my job role, asking for more opportunities, or in some cases just taking it, and saying, okay, I have a proposal. Here's what I want to do. Here's where I think we should go. But taking those chances. Don't just say, okay, this is my job role. This is the job description. Let me check the boxes and think I'm going to get to that next step. Take chances, learn. And it's not up to your company to teach you a lot of this stuff. It is up to the person. Your companies can provide opportunities, but everyone learns differently. Everyone has different experiences. Look outside of multifamily, look outside of your company and see what other opportunities there are for you to absorb some knowledge, but take chances. I remember I was fortunate to work for a VP when I was at Lane Company many years ago. She hired me. It was an arduous hiring process. And then I started and I was thrown to the wolves. And I couldn't understand why. But what I realized, she knew that's how I was going to learn. Mm-hmm. At 24, I did my first investment pro forma on a deal that we bought that was probably $20 million. I had no idea what I was doing. I was also very clear about that, but it was figure it out. So I did. And
wow.
That's the tenacity that people need to grow in this space, is just put yourself out there, go above and beyond. And if there's something you don't know, find somebody to ask. Mm-hmm. Ask questions, because guess what? Nobody knows everything. I'm still asking questions every day, especially when it comes to the investment side of our business. Yeah. You know, I understand it, but am I the expert? No. So I go to the expert.
Well, we certainly were honored to have you today, Jared. I mean, talk about above and beyond. This was above and beyond, and it was so fun talking with you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Thank you again for the opportunity.
You bet.
Absolutely. This was great. Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.